And now I'm really delighted, and I'm sure you can't wait to hear who our next speaker is, and it will be Chiedza Muguti. Chiedza is an assiduous product leader, well-versed both on the technical and the commercial side across the whole product development lifecycle. She's a skilled communicator, which makes her successful and effective at all levels of business, and is a servant product leader, leading high-performing teams that are known for collaborative problem-solving and, most importantly, for successful outcomes. I really look forward to her insights and, more importantly, her invitation for all of us to reflect what makes high-performing teams. In her talk, Equitable Product Teams Must Be Our North Star. Please give a very, very warm welcome to Chiedza Muguti. Rocket.
Hi, everyone. I always feel a little bit weird when people read my intro, because I'm just like, oh my gosh, I sound like such a dick. But anyways, I hope you all enjoyed the coffee break. I did attempt to talk to someone I don't know, but I am an introvert, so I walk like straight through the crowd. So I just want to thank all the extroverts out there who make our lives that much easier and start the conversation. So I hope that everybody else got to talk to someone, and next time you see me walking through, please shame me, publicly shame me. So I'm going to start off and tell you a little bit about me and who these four people are with me. So you've got my grandmothers on the left and the right-hand side, and then the picture is me with my mom and dad. So I'm a middle child, and I feel like I don't have as many photos with my parents. So as a child, so I've really made up for it in adulthood. And the reason that I've got them here in front of, that I wanted to share them with you, is because they informed a lot about my values and why I am so passionate about equity. The four of them, my grandmothers are now late, but the four of them are masters at really showing you have to understand a person, you have to understand their background, you have to understand their story to get the best out of them. A quick thing that I will tell you is that when we were growing up, so I'm Zimbabwean, we had a lady who came to help us with the house, and she had sort of no formal education. And my mom sat her down and said, do you want to look after children and clean the house for the rest of your life? And she said no. And my mom said, right, so what you're going to do while you're here and look after my children is I'm going to pay for you to go back to high school. You do that part-time, and then now she's a teacher, which means it's also changed the outcomes for her family. So just wanted to give you a little bit of why I'm so inspired by that. So as I said, I'm Zimbabwean. I moved to the UK when I was 19 years old to go and study. I thought I'd leave Zimbabwe for 5 years, but it's been 21, so, here we are. I went to university in Brighton, in the UK, which is by the sea. And coming from a landlocked country, I thought I'd spend my life at the beach, but it seems the novelty wears off quite quickly. But I'm still partial to a fish and chips. So initially I was going to become, yeah, I know, I love it. So initially I was going to become an engineer, but I got I think 35% for my Java module. So yeah, I'm a failed engineer and I ended up in product. I wonder how many of us are exactly the same. So I started off my career in payments, working in a business analyst role, and then I was convinced / pushed / influenced to move into product. So anyway, here we are 15 years later. So some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is going to make you feel awkward. And for me, I feel awkward from here. So I've been feeling awkward from here since the morning that I was going to be standing in front of you. And maybe it might make you feel a little bit weird. And that's absolutely fine, because I want this awkwardness to be a team sport. So we're all going to feel awkward together. And that's fine. And I want you to sit with those feelings. And I want you to think about where they come from. And I want you to handle yourself with care. So this is not a talk where I want you to feel bad afterwards and just be like, I have the weight of the world on my shoulders, I have messed up. It's not about that. It's just about how we can collectively reflect about how we can move forward together. So since we've just come from a break, I think we still need some physical activity. So I'm going to ask some questions. So if the answer is yes, please can you stand up? We're going to have to be really quick because I'm already looking at the timer and it's telling me, girl. I will participate, but I will put my hand up. So we're going to be really, really quick. So first question is, how many of you have been in a team or are in a team where when there is a conversation, you feel like everybody can contribute? You don't kind of have the same 2 or 3 people speaking. So how many of you would say hey, I work in a team, and please do look around. This is not an exam, so there's no cheating, so you can look. So yeah, how many of you feel hey, I work in a team and we can all speak up? Okay, I want to work where all of you are working. Amazing. How many of you have worked with someone where maybe they've joined the organization and you've been don't know how long this person's going to last, but they've blossomed and gone on to the next stage in their career and just really been absolutely amazing? This is such a great, positive crowd. I love it. How many of you have worked in a team? So specifically looking at BIPOC, so this is Black, Indigenous, people of color. How many of you, if you look at the society around you, so day to day when you're commuting or in shops, and you look kind of at the makeup of the society around you, how many of you would say your team is representative of BIPOC people? Okay, cool. Okay. Great. Okay. How many of you have had a leader who is from a minoritized group? So this covers some of the protected characteristics around race, sexuality, religion. So how many of you have had a leader, and they can also have intersections. So how many of you have had a leader who is from a minoritized group? I am that person. Okay. How many of you have worked with a displaced person? So I'll explain. I don't use the word refugee because it's got such negative connotations, and I use displaced person because I think if we say displaced, we can all imagine what it could feel like to be displaced, and I think then that you have more empathy for people. So how many of you have worked with a displaced person? Cool. How many of you have worked in an organization, okay, they don't have to be doing it, but are now yeah, cultural add as opposed to cultural fit? Okay. How many of you have worked with, I don't know why I'm laughing, how many of you have worked with someone over the age of 50? So I know age is a little bit yeah, tricky. Some people are not sure. Okay, so almost everyone. Okay, amazing. How many of you have worked with someone who has a physical disability? Okay. Cool. Thank you all so much for participating. It was really nice because it's a really great way to also get to know you. So none of these questions were asked to make you feel bad, uncomfortable maybe, because maybe there were a couple where you were just BIPOC, what's going on? My nice group, what's going on? I want you to be curious. I want you to be pensive. So if you did not answer yes to any of those, I want you to be curious about why that is. But it's never, ever to make people feel bad. I don't want you to feel bad at all. So we all know diversity matters. I mean, this is a word that we're seeing everywhere. I feel like diversity and AI are competing to be the word of the year. And we know that there have been lots of studies that have been done that companies that have a diverse leadership team tend to perform 25% better financially. But what about equity? I feel like this is something that we don't really hear about. And just a disclaimer, I'm not talking about the amount of equity you get in a company. This is not about money. I'm sorry. I'm the worst person to talk about that. So just to make it clear. So just to try to explain a little bit using an analogy, because I love analogies, is let's think of an art exhibition. So we have an art exhibition, and so I can explain diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, because we see these together a lot of the time. So diversity would be all the different artists that are represented at the art exhibition. So you want to get a range of artists that's representative of the society around you. Equity is the time and space the art gets. So some artists are more prominent than other artists. So what equity is thinking about the artists who maybe don't get as much airtime, are not as well known, and figuring out maybe how we can position their art so that they do get a little bit more airtime. This is not to take away from the artists maybe who do get a lot of airtime, but it's to try to say, like, how can we make it a little bit more fair and give more space? Inclusion is how the art is represented. So we want everything to look like it fits together and it looks like it's one exhibition. So that's inclusion without making it like this is different from that. And then belonging is how we talk about the art. So belonging is talking about it and that it's the human story, bringing it all together, that we're doing this art exhibition, it's all art, we embrace all the different artists without sort of othering. So this is what belonging is about. So equity really refers to fairness and justice. And I think it's important to make the distinction because I think people conflate equity and equality quite a lot. So equality really focuses on everybody gets exactly the same. So thankfully, we did not grow up like that because me, my brother, and my sister all have very different eating habits. So equality would be my mom forcing us to all eat the same thing, which would have been futile. But equity is saying like, okay, I'm going to meet you, Chiedza, where you are with your 1,000 allergies and not try to kill you and feed you the exact same thing as your brother and your sister because that will put you at a disadvantage. So equity is really about addressing the adjustment, the imbalances that we know we have in society. So when you hear me use the word equity or the word equitable, if it's easier for you, just replace that with fair and impartial. And I believe a picture says 1,000 words, and this is why I love this picture. So on the left-hand side, okay, so first of all, we have 3 people who look like they've cake crashed a football game. So they don't look like they've bought tickets, but we won't talk about the fact that they might not supposed to be there. But what we have on the left-hand side is equality. Everybody gets exactly the same. The person on the left doesn't really need that box. It's not going to enhance the experience, really, because this person is like tall enough to be able to see and hear what's going on. The person in the middle can see what's going on standing on the box, but they are still expending energy having to stand on their toes. And every so often, they're going to have to come down, and they might miss something. But just think about, they cannot concentrate fully because they're thinking, gosh, I have to keep standing on my toes so I can see what's happening. So you can kind of enjoy, but you kind of have to always be cognizant that I need to get on my toes. And then for the person who's in the wheelchair, this is absolutely useless. It doesn't help. Give everybody the same. Let's not favor anybody. It's not about favoring, but it's about looking at how can we make this more balanced. Equity is what we see on the right-hand side. So you can see the person on the left, he's living his best life, still enjoying. His hand is even up. He's enjoying even more. And maybe it's because the other 2 can see more, and they can now enjoy it a little bit more together. The person in the middle doesn't have to expend energy anymore standing on their toes because now they've got 2 boxes and they can see it. And the person on the wheelchair now has a ramp and they can get up and see exactly what's going on. We all have an innate desire. It doesn't matter who you are, no matter how hardcore you are, no matter how much you say you're an introvert, you don't like other people, we still, whenever we're in a group, we want to feel we belong, and we really want to feel accepted. We also really yearn to be seen, we want to be heard, and we want to know that what we say matters. So you can imagine those 3 at the game. So think about the one on the left-hand side, that maybe afterwards they're talking about the game, and the person who's in the wheelchair, they could hear, but they couldn't really see. The one in the middle might have missed some bits and pieces, and maybe they feel like, you know what, I don't really feel like I belong here. But we also love familiarity, and that's that whole thing about that awkward feeling. We feel better around people we can understand and we know, and that's fine. That makes us human. And why is equity so important in product teams? Because if we can draw people out of themselves, and we can get people to open up, and we can get people to share, and we can get people to really tell us what's on their minds, we will be that much more innovative, and we will be that much more creative. And also because we'll have this wide range of the way people see the world and the way people think, then when we get these customer insights, we're not going to interpret them all in the same way. People are going to have different ways of interpreting that, which makes it much, much richer. And also, once we unlock people's potential, it's a wide range of skills that we can draw from, right? So I'm kind of known for like breaking the ice in meetings, and this is a skill that we deploy in teams, so I'm known for that, and we use that. I'm not really that well known for like when there's a lot of conflict, so there are other people who then can manage that, and that's totally fine. And the more that people feel like they can express themselves, they can share, and they can also be themselves, then the more satisfied they are. And all of those things, insert currency, bills. Make more money. And why do we have to care? Because the products and services that we put out there influence society, and they have an impact. So if we're baking in our own biases or the way we think, maybe we have a limited way of seeing things, we're just going to put this into our products. And if we really want to build inclusive products, and I see this all the time, I see this like, we want to be inclusive, we want belonging, etc. But we have to look inwards to make sure and say, from the team that we're in, are we actually fostering an environment where people feel like they are included, that they feel like they open up and they can share? Because if they don't, then what you do on the outside is just going to be reflecting that. And why we have to think about this even more is that globalization means a complete change to the workforce. We are now more and more working with people who are really different from us, different backgrounds from different countries, and we have to really think about the unique needs of individuals to make sure that they can flourish. And I know product people, we love to say, like, measure what matters. And this is normally like customer acquisition costs and revenue and acquisition. But then what about the people who are driving all of those things? How are you measuring how they feel? How are you measuring whether they feel included? And we normally palm this off to people and culture teams, which I think is really quite wrong. Because as product people, we are used to thinking about how can we measure something. And I do believe that there's a great contribution that we can make to thinking about how we can measure that. So one thing in an organization that we looked at was attrition. So how long do people stay and when do they leave? And just to also reiterate, and I will keep saying, is that this is not someone else's job. This is a collective responsibility. Everybody in their small way can make people feel like they should be here. So I'll give some real-world examples about how something where we build something with equity can make such a big difference. So I don't know how many of you know M-Pesa. It started off in Kenya, so it's to do with mobile money. And so clap in the front, thank you. And what M-Pesa did is that a lot of the banks that we have in Africa are like a copy and paste of the banks that are here in the West. So when you want to open a bank account, identity documents, sometimes they want to know if you own property. But if I think about my grandmothers, they had no title deeds. And they really didn't have identification documents because they grew up in a time where Zimbabwe was a colony. It was very difficult for them to get identity documents, which meant it was very difficult for them to participate in the economy, which meant they were excluded. What mobile money did was to see that there is a gap, and actually everybody should be able to participate in the economy, not just some people, not just people in urban areas. So what M-Pesa came and did is say, you know what, let's use the phone number as a proxy for people now to be able to exchange money. And it took off. It's been replicated across other African countries. And guess who the most upset about this is? The banks. But they slept on the job. Then if we think about banks, so I remit money home. I think a lot of people who are diasporans do the same thing. And just to give you an example, Zimbabwe is not the biggest country. So we are a country of 14 million people. And in 2020, $1.8 billion US was remitted into Zimbabwe from all over the world. And that's 10% of our GDP. If I go into my Halifax bank account or my Deutsche Bank bank account, which the interface is unreal, there is no way to do remittances. So I have to move the money from my bank to World Remit to then do the remittance. And sometimes I think to myself, they could make a ton of money if they just built this. Because if you ask anyone, they would love for this all to be in their app, right? But then maybe they think like this is not a use case worth solving, because maybe their teams don't really have anybody who has that as a problem to solve. So it's just thinking about, sometimes we limit ourselves by not solving problems that are real problems that could make us a lot of money. But I do have a lot of hope because I see things like Udemy or Coursera that are starting to democratize education. Because believe it or not everybody has the money to go to university or to go to college or the time. But this allows people access. And this is just a snippet of what we can achieve if we start to open up our teams and make sure that we're representing society and actually understanding what the problems are on the ground. If you are working in a team with people all over the world, and if you are sitting firmly in the red circle, I can tell you someone is suffering in that team. Because if you're working in a team with people all over the world, I would expect you to be going between comfort and fear. Fear because sometimes when we don't really know how to communicate with people, we don't know where people come from, we're a little bit anxious. How do we talk? I know people during Black Lives Matter were terrified of talking to me about it, but I would have loved for someone to just be like, how are you feeling? Because people know I'm directly affected by that. But people just kind of stayed in their comfort zone. And then I'm the one who brought it up in a team meeting. I was like, hey, I am really being affected right now by what's going on. And then we went into fear, and then eventually we moved into the learning zone where people learned a little bit more, and then we could discuss. But this is not just talking about things that are happening in society, because if we get comfortable on a personal level to get to know each other, to understand each other, it means that when we have problems to solve, we have those tools to understand each other, and we apply exactly the same way of asking each other those questions, and we start to build that psychological safety within our teams. As tech professionals, we exist in a bubble. And the fact that we exist in that bubble really sometimes means that society, we're not as connected to society as we think we are. And it means that a lot of times we're not really solving the things that would make a big difference to everybody's life. So I would encourage you and challenge you to step outside your bubble. So one thing that I do outside of work is I do a lot of volunteering. And I will tell you a very interesting story, because, we're amongst friends. I volunteer for an organization on Wednesday nights, and we go out into the red light district in Berlin, in Kurfürstenstraße, if people have been to Berlin, so it's a red light district. And we go out with coffee and biscuits and cake and things like this, and we just talk to the sex workers, just figuring out if somebody maybe has been trafficked and they might need some help or anything that we can do to support them. And one of them asked me, what do you do? And then I was like, oh yeah, I'm a product manager. And she just looked at me like, what? And then I was like, oh yeah, so this is what I do. And she's like, is that a full-time job? And I was like, yeah, of course it's a full-time job. And so I found myself really talking. And then she said to me, after we talked about it for a few minutes, she was like, do you think I could ever do that job? And I was like, of course you could. And so how could I get started? And this also, I'm sure, happens when you have occasions with family and with friends and they're not working in tech and you try to explain. And for me, it's so important to stretch myself and make sure that I'm keeping in touch because it keeps me humble. And it also makes me think, okay, what are the things that maybe I'm not asking and not talking about at work that maybe we should make explicit? So if I can challenge you to do one of these 5 things, or all 5 if you're that eager, one thing is to engage with established communities. Wherever you are, there are communities that are supporting various groups. So you might find communities that are supporting people from the LGBTQ+ community. You might find communities that are supporting displaced persons. Just engage with those communities. Why? Because the more we can get out there, talk about what we do, the more we can then maybe attract these people to join us in the work that we're doing, and the more reflective that our teams will be of society, because really that should be our North Star. And then follow companies that organize boot camps. So I don't know if you've heard of companies like Le Wagon, Career Foundry, Iron Hack. And why am I asking you to follow them because a lot of the people who do these boot camps are groups of people who are not in our bubble, who would massively benefit from connecting with people like you. And they are always looking for people who can maybe take people for internships, a little bit of work experience, or just to talk about careers. So I would really encourage you to try to follow those companies, and then if you have time, to maybe do a talk for them. And then be intentional about creating space for people in your team. So there might be that person in your team who, they want to say stuff, but they tend to keep a little bit to themselves. Please, I'm not asking you to put people on the spot, but try to figure out maybe why they're not really opening up in the group and create space. And also people who tend to cut other people off, if you're one of the people who's brave enough, I've kind of become one of those people, to say, hey, that person was finishing a point, let's let them finish. Because people will role model that behavior. If you're a leader, be an active sponsor for the people in your team. So really think about what does this person need from an individual perspective to grow in their role, and make sure that when you're in leadership meetings, you're talking about the progress that person is making. Because when we're talking about promotion cycles and pay, these are the kind of things that stick in people's minds. And also, there are a lot of platforms out there looking for mentors, so I'd encourage you to, if you haven't already, sign up to become a mentor. Also, talk about in your teams, are you really ready for someone who's really different? And there's a reason that I specifically did not focus on recruitment when talking about equity within teams, because the work starts from the inside. Please do not bring people from the outside to do the work for you. Create an environment that is healthy and equitable within your team, and then bring others along. And also think about the benefits that I talked about and how those align with your organizational goals. Because believe me, the more people can open up, the more money you will make. So I am not sure why I chose that photo, but it was just too late. It's fine. It's me just being me. The only reason I'm standing here is because I was in a team that was very, very equitable. So if you can see me, I'm very colorful, can be a little bit chaotic, quite an emotional person. Started my career in the UK working with super upper middle class posh people, right? You cannot get more opposite than that. But my boss, who was the most posh, amazing man, saw something in me and was you are going to do big things. And he made sure that for each one of us, he understood what we needed, he understood what we struggle with, and pushed us in the right direction. He always encouraged us to be understanding towards each other, and also to try to form those bonds outside of work, for us just to get to know each other and for people to feel safe. And this meant that, I was in that company for 10 years. How many people have worked in a company for 10 years? But it's because I felt I belonged. I really, truly felt like I belonged. And I truly, truly felt like I really, really could be myself. And that's given me the confidence still that is pushing me today. So this talk was just about going on a journey together, collective reflection. And if you go on Instagram, X formerly known as Twitter, Facebook, you would think we live in a world where we literally hate each other's guts and we're so different. But I believe that we are, and I know, I don't just believe, I know, we are way closer to each other than we are apart. But we focus on the things that make us different as opposed to focusing on the humanity that unites us. And all of us, we're not powerless. Every single one of you has the potential to make a difference in someone's life. So I'm going to finish off with 2 quotes. Ethics and equity and the principles of justice do not change with the calendar. In simple terms, it don't matter what time it is. Equity, ethics, and justice always have a place in society. And then I'll finish with an African saying, which is umuntu ngubuntu ngabantu, which means I am because you are. We are connected. The things that I do will affect you in some sort of way. The care that I extend to you, you will extend to someone else. We are not separated. We are one human race. Now, I probably sound like I shouldn't be at a product conference, but it's really important because we are closer together than we are apart. And every single one of us deserves to work in a place where we walk in and we feel, I belong here. Thank you.